Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Dark Pixel Podcast. My name is Mike.
I'm Kason.
I exported that little intro video that plays at the beginning of all our podcasts. I forgot to click the Square Pixels box, so it was all
So it was all blurry. Oh, I see.
It's all stretched and in the wrong aspect ratio. Welcome, everybody. Okay, we have some really good topics today. I'm actually pretty excited to get started. We'll start with our news topics here. Number one, if you guys have not heard this yet, Grandia I and II are coming to the Nintendo Switch this winter, an HD remaster of Grandia I and II packaged together in one game. Grandia II is already on Steam, but they're going to be bringing Grandia I to Steam now as well. So, I played Grandia 1 a little bit. It was actually the very first look episode I did on the channel back when I was still doing that. And I loved it. I love the tone. I love the colorful sprites. I love that you have 2D sprites for the characters in a 3D world, kind of like Xenogears. I just think that worked.
Yeah, Xenogears.
That aesthetic really worked well for the PlayStation. I really liked it. It's a very charming game, very funny, well written. It's witty. And I have been excited to play it a little bit more. Of course, it has not been voted on yet, even though it's been in the vote.
What are people doing? What are they doing not voting on that one?
But this might be...
You did a first look of Grandia, right?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, I remember that. I remember you really liked it, too.
It's great, and I like the battle system a lot, too. It's real interesting and unique. So nice. This might be the perfect opportunity to jump into it, and whether or not you have a Switch... or you don't have a Switch, you just want to play it on PC, you'll be able to play it this winter. It is coming sometime this winter, Grandia 1 and 2 HD, to the Nintendo Switch.
It's a big deal.
It's freaking awesome.
Yeah. What about the Secret of Mana remake? Is that out now?
The Secret of Mana remake's been out, but it's only on PlayStation.
See, and that was the funny thing,
I think.
So
yeah, it didn't come to the Switch. Yeah, and actually, I don't think they have any plans to bring the Secret of Mana remake to the Switch. But I still want that Secret of Mana collection that was like exclusive in Japan that had Secret of Mana 1, 2, and 3 in one game on the Switch. I want that. That's what I want.
They released that, and then they remade the first one, and then that collection never showed up. That was disappointing.
Freaking dumb.
And I don't think that collection was on the Super NES Classic either, or any of those games.
Well, I think Secret of Mana was on the Super.
Was Mana on there?
Ooh. Yeah, Chrono Trigger wasn't, but Secret of Mana was.
Yeah, I remember.
But no, there's never been an official Seiken Densetsu 3 release outside of Japan to this day.
They think we won't like it.
I don't get it. But yeah,
that's ridiculous.
If they could bring that. And then this though, Grandia 1 and 2 HD coming to the Switch. Super awesome.
Big deal.
For Switch users. So look forward to that. Look forward to that. We'll update you guys more when we learn more about it. They said that there will be a demo available to play at PAX this year.
Cool.
PAX West, I think. So yeah, we should be hearing more about it here pretty soon. Anyways, if you guys didn't know about it, there it is. Wanted to let you guys know. That's coming. Look forward to it. Please be excited.
Please look forward to it. Okay. Please!
All right, so second topic. This has been gaining a little bit of buzz. A couple weeks back, we talked about Nintendo sending some cease and desist to a couple of ROM sites, specifically that went down, or at least one of them went down altogether. The other one was like, we don't have ROMs available anymore. But now things are getting really crazy. So MU Paradise is now no longer offering any ROMs, no longer offering any games whatsoever. They're saying we're restructuring the website. We're not.
What do they do then?
That's a good question.
What else do they possibly offer?
They still have like forums and communities for retro games and stuff like that, but they no longer offer any games on their site. The ISO Zone, I believe, as well, has also just recently put out a similar statement where they're like, hey, we're changing how we operate. and we don't offer ROMs and ISOs anymore at all. So I wanted to talk about this a little bit because Nintendo got aggressive in the last few months about ROM sites, sites offering free downloadable games. And I saw a really good video. If you guys don't know Game Dave is the channel. I like his channel a lot. He's got a really interesting personality perspective. He's a fun guy to watch. And he did a video, I think it was last week, on essentially he's afraid for the preservation of games moving forward with sites like this going down and stuff like that. And so I wanted to talk about that for a second, but at the same time, right? Just today, I was on Twitter on my phone, and I saw that Chrono Trigger, the Steam version of Chrono Trigger, was on sale, 50% off. So it's like $8, right?
Nice.
And I was like, oh, cool, that's awesome. Well, I was a little bit upset because I had just bought it for full price like 2 weeks ago.
Well,
but I was kind of I was reading through what people are saying, and this is actually the same thing that I saw so much on the video that I did about Chrono Trigger on Steam a couple weeks back, right? I did a video talking about it, and like I don't know, I'd have to say at least 20, 30 comments that I saw down there were, why would I pay for Chrono Trigger if I can download it for free? And
yeah, those people signed their own death warrant.
I know. This is the reason this is happening. You are the reason. Right? Like, dude, it's so stupid because I don't know. Before I get back into that again, though, this is like Steam's official Twitter that posted this sale, and it just like you just go down the list of people, just being like, why would I buy it if I can download it for free? Derp, derp, derp.
Well, guess what, people? Now you can't.
Well, they're really cracking down on it now.
Yeah.
So the argument that Game Dave makes in his video, right, is that emulation is not just about playing games for free. It's mostly, or for a lot of people in the community, it's about preserving these experiences, right?
Yeah.
Because a lot of those companies that were making games on the NES, they don't exist anymore. Even there, I was reading this interesting article where somebody was basically, I don't know if data mining is the right word, but data mining Super Mario from the Wii Virtual Console, or I think it was, or maybe on the eShop. I can't remember which. It was Wii U or it was on the Wii. They were data mining it, and they looked and found that what Nintendo had done is they had gone to a ROM site and downloaded a ROM of Super Mario Brothers, and then put that on the eShop. Now, for whatever reason that is, I don't know. Whether it brings into question, because this is not confirmed, this is speculation, it brings into question whether or not they had the
like
original
yes ROM. Yeah,
yes,
in their own library.
And it brings into question, like, even a company like Nintendo, as powerful as they are, and as committed as they are, and as often as they will re-release and sell their older games, right? Even they could have a problem with preserving these games.
Yeah.
So the emulation community was about, like, keeping those safe and preserving them. If Nintendo's potentially, allegedly having a problem with this, then of course you're not going to get, like, a lot of those companies who aren't even around anymore. Like, those could be gone forever. Those games could be completely erased from history, right?
Yeah.
So in Game Dave's video, now he obviously acknowledges the fact that, like, yeah, downloading a game for free is illegal, but that what he would often do is use emulation as a means to test something, try it out as a demo, more or less. And then it was like, that's really cool. I want to add that to my collection. He has a huge game collection that's in the back of all his videos, and he would go out and find a physical copy of that game. Now, of course, that doesn't matter that Game Dave is to whatever extent ethical about it. A lot of people, a lot of people are just using it to download games for free.
Yes.
So I understand, like from a company like Nintendo's perspective, the idea of preserving and like legally safeguarding your intellectual property, right? I also don't understand why they can't just have a service and release all of that stuff either like on their own website or I don't know what. There's got to be something done though. If the companies themselves aren't going to be as interested or as motivated and don't find it as important to preserve these games, then someone else is going to do it. So it's a really interesting, dicey sort of like talking point, right? But you know, there's always the case to be made that once something's on the internet, it's always on the internet. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter that these ROM sites are going down. You can find a torrent if you really want to find, you know, like the entire library of the NES somewhere or something like that. It's always going to be available. But I don't know. I just feel like the way they're going about it, it sends a message that they're out of touch behind, I think, the reason why people love these retro games and want to preserve those. Mm-hmm. And this is another interesting point. In the month of June, the NES Classic was had the highest sales of any hardware in the industry. So it beat the PlayStation 4, it beat the Nintendo Switch. The NES Classic was the highest selling console, not dollars wise, but just units.
Unit wise, sure. Yeah,
because it's $59 versus a $350 console, whatever.
Yeah, of course.
So the NES Classic was the highest selling console in America in the month of June. And I would hope, I would really, really hope that something like that would get through to the brains of big executives at Nintendo and others that were back, you know, making games those days. Mm-hmm. And they would say people care about the preservation of these experiences that they grew up in, and that they would start to take that seriously. Because if they would just do that, if they would offer some virtual console-like experience online, on their website, whatever it is, where you could download those games, whether that's a monthly subscription, $5 a month, or whether that's $1 per game or something like that, just something. They could make so much money because so many people want that. And instead of providing that service, walking into the space where there is obviously a desire for it and providing that for them, they're just going around and shutting everyone down. And it just really, really bothers me. That's never the right way to do it. You're only going to piss people off instead of actually like resolving the issue that you have, which I understand because, like I said, on that Steam post, all those people being like, "Oh, I could just get it for free. Why would I buy it?" They're going to look at that and they're going to be like, "See?
I would."
Stupid.
Totally. So one of the things I'm hearing a lot in the chat right now, and that I would actually echo myself, a lot of people are saying that they discovered these games through emulation. That if it weren't for emulation, they would never have cared that the SNES Classic was coming out. They wouldn't have ever even been known that there were good games back then, right? Like a lot of people look at 8-bit, 16-bit stuff the same way they look at black and white films. They're just like, oh, boring. I don't want it. I don't want it. But, you know, if you ever have time or some way to access them for free and actually kind of get into them a little bit, then you can realize there's actually some really valuable stuff there. And I think that part of the reason, and Dreamcast guy said this too, like part of the reason that he even like has his channel, that he even, you know, plays half the games he does, is because when he was younger, he'd emulate. And that's what I would do. Like, I like that Dave talks about how he'll use emulation to like try out a game, then he'll go buy it. I didn't do that. I just play straight games straight through. But now that I'm 30 and I'm willing to buy an SNES Classic, and I am asking anyways, it's like, you got to play the long game with this stuff. Sure, when I was 12, 15, 18, you know, even in my 20s, I would emulate games because I couldn't find them or I couldn't have them. But now I can go and buy them. And like, sure, it's been a long time, but if those emulations were shut off when I was 15, when I'm 30, all of a sudden I just don't care. And so it's like a short-sighted solution to what they see as just this terrible problem, which is actually probably the best way of spreading awareness for their product.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Like that's very true of me as well. Like I emulated Chrono Trigger because I didn't have a Super Nintendo. I went to my friend's house when he had a Super Nintendo and played it with him a little bit, but then I emulated Chrono Trigger a little bit. But I still bought the DS version.
Yeah,
I still bought the Steam version.
You bought it, right?
I still bought the game on the Virtual Console. I bought the game like 3 more times after having having emulated it. I still bought the game 3 times.
But you wouldn't have even known. Yeah, and you sure as heck would not have bought that game had you not emulated it before or had you not known anything about it.
Yeah. And so, I don't know. I think that the perspective of these companies is one that is very short-sighted, like you're saying. Like and they're only looking at the freaking morons who are publicly saying something so stupid as that on our Reddit, video,
Twitter,
and on Twitter. Like, why? Like, why would you do that? Anyways, they're perpetuating the problem. It freaking pisses me off so much. But
they are.
Anyways, the other thing I wanted to talk about regarding this is that I know that a big problem with Jared Fight says, just give me every Dreamcast classic, Skies of Arcadia, anyone. Nice. There was another super chat.
Generation had also made a donation earlier. So
I just scrolled up to that. Lipstick Generation.
Saying, good job, rock on, all that stuff.
Okay, out on errands. Looking forward to listening tomorrow. Rock on, fellas. Okay, thank you both for the super chats. We appreciate you guys.
Very much so. Thank you.
Okay, so you know, on something like an NES Classic, an SNES Classic, you know, you see a lot of the more hardcore gamers and like retro gaming enthusiasts being like, oh, but this game's missing, and this game's missing, and this game's missing. And there's a lot of games that are like, oh, they're missing. Now, some of that, I think, boils down to licensing issues, right? So, you
third-party developers,
There are games like, this is a Nintendo game, but Crisis Core, for instance, that I think the only reason we have not seen a Crisis Core HD is because of Gact. Like Gact's music and Gact himself being an actor in the Japanese version, right?
Yeah.
He would want royalties.
Kingdom Hearts has that problem too with Utada Hikaru.
Yeah.
When it comes to when they re-release their games, there's some weird licensing issues with that.
Yeah. So like, rather than get caught up in the red tape and have to pay a bunch of money to an artist or another company, in the instance of, I think, Mega Man Legends, there was they had like little what do you call them? Where you get soda out of the machine. What are those called?
Oh, vending machines.
Vending machine. There's like vending machines
in
the game that have like Coca-Cola brand like on them and stuff like that. So like they had trouble with reselling or doing a remastered version or whatever because of that too. So like I get that, right? And for a lot of these companies, like I said, they might not even exist anymore. These companies that were making games on the NES, these crappy games that nobody really knew about or bought, but that you still want to try and preserve. So, however, if we don't preserve them in some form now, if there's not an effort being made to preserve them, and you know that big corporations and companies aren't going to be making efforts of that kind unless there is money to be made in the effort in doing so, generally speaking. But if it's not being done now, when and if those games ever pass into the public domain, which should be 95 years after the publishing date for a corporation or 120 years after the creation, whichever comes first.
It won't be, though, because Disney keeps changing the rules.
Well, it also depends on renewals, right? So like like you're saying, Disney renewing their basically hold on those IPs over time and lengthening that forever. But a lot of these companies...
Would Nintendo do that? Probably.
Nintendo probably would, but I don't think anyone's concerned about Nintendo's games ever not being available, right? I think people trust for the most part, unless it's true that they downloaded a ROM of Super Mario.
I didn't know that. You're the first. That's the first time I'd ever heard it. Is when you told me that.
Yeah, the version that was on the Virtual Console was. a freaking ROM that they downloaded. Anyways,
Jeez.
so but most people would trust a company like Nintendo that's going to last for a long time to be offering services like the NES Classic into the future where you'll be able to play Super Mario for however long you want. But it's for these other companies that don't exist anymore. They're not going to renew those license or those what do you call them, copyrights? You know what I mean? Like they're gone and dead or whatever. Like when those would at some point, I would think, pass into the public domain.
They should, yeah.
So how can we experience, share, have those things if they're not available at all? And that was the role, I think, the one super beneficial role that ROM communities like MU Paradise provided. They collected and they preserved all of these games that would completely disappear and pass into obscurity without them. So anyways, like I was saying, once something's on the internet, it's always on the internet. You're being able to find it somewhere. The people who ran those websites still have those ROMs backed up on hard drives somewhere. So it's not like they're going to be lost. But
right, their servers are somewhere. They're just not accessible at the moment.
It's just about whether or not 90, 100 years from now, when something does legally pass into the public domain, will people be able to access that? And hopefully the answer is yes. But ultimately,
I kind of thought of an analogy with our old YouTube channel, right? With the Dark Pixel, our Super Mario Parkour, or our Lazy Jedi video. We actually would pursue people who would repost those videos on Facebook or Reddit or other websites. And we would actually, get them to take it down most of the time. The original was up to view for free. However, that was kind of the idea. But what if YouTube went offline and for some reason we don't have the original Lazy Jedi copy anymore because we screwed up and we lost it and we don't have it.
Well, right? Yeah, we have them on hard drives.
If it goes down, that video's gone forever and we're not making it again. So
no. We have them on hard drives, but those hard drives don't last forever.
Hard drive could fail. Yeah,
we would have to
and it's like, well, maybe.
I think I lost you.
We pursued.
Crap. Okay, we lost Case in there for a second. He should be back in a minute. Anyways, we had them. I have the original copies of those videos backed up on hard drives, but I'd have to be like actively pursuing switching it onto a new hard drive every couple of years to ensure. And with as much as is going on in my life, like sometimes I don't remember to do that every couple of years. You know what I mean? So anyways, do we want to trust that Nintendo and Sega and all these old companies that made games for the freaking Commodore 64 and the PC 88 series, we're going to trust that the Death Trap, Square's the Death Trap, will be somewhere in their corporate office? It's tough. It's a tough situation, and what I really wish would happen is that if Nintendo is going to pursue these sites and send cease and desist and ask them to take that stuff down, I would really, really hope and wish that they would be making an effort themselves to preserve those things.
Man, I swear that happens every week.
You're good. But at least you're not crackling. You're not crackling. Your voice is nice and clean. And clean. Anyways, what were you saying there at the end?
I was just saying that, maybe it's not as bad as it seems from the company's perspective, having other people uploading your work. Mm-hmm. Given the fact that we used to run a company that would frequently have our work stolen from us and uploaded different places. Don't like it, but if for some reason we didn't have it anymore, it would literally be gone forever. So, there's something to that.
Chocolate Rob says we need to back up Kaysen to emulate him whenever his internet breaks down.
I'm gone. Once the internet's out, it's like, do I even exist? You have no proof.
Kaysen is erased.
I'm erased. I should upload my brain. That way it can at least say what I'm thinking, what I would have thought.
Freaking I gotta download a Kaysen emulator.
I would sue though. I'd have that taken down so fast. Oh, geez.
Anyways, it's a topic that I find really interesting, and if anyone else has other perspectives you want to share, please do so in the comments. I'll go back through and read them.
I heard a few. I know that Heon was saying that Nintendo has almost an obligation to pursue websites that distribute their work for free without, any profit sharing or any legal deal worked out. And that if Nintendo doesn't pursue them, it could possibly be legally problematic for them in the future when they do selectively pursue somebody else for doing the same thing. The problem I have with that in general is that this website's been around for 20 years and they've had Nintendo ROMs for a very long time. And it's like, okay, you could say, oh, Nintendo legally, they had to do it. If they didn't do it, it would have been problematic. But it's like, well, they haven't done it for 20 years. So I don't really think, I don't know. The emulation debate question is just so deep. It's a rabbit hole that goes down forever because there is a morally justifiable reason for having that material accessible. There's also a morally justifiable reason for no one ever downloading it ever for any reason ever.
Yeah.
Just it needs to be there, but nobody should use it. It's just the weirdest thing ever.
More or less what it is. It should be there. But
if it's there, people are going to use it. Like, I don't... Anyways, it's just...
But it's talking about no profit sharing or anything. That's another way I feel like Nintendo and a lot of these other companies could pursue something like that without just like taking
YouTube
it away
deal.
altogether. Yeah. It's like, hey, we want, I don't know, even as high as like freaking 90% of like all the profits you make on downloads anyways from our games or whatever. I don't know. And some kind of profit sharing would be one way to do it, to legitimize it and make it so that like they don't have to fetch and do anything. They don't have to provide a service or like go through the hassle of creating an emulator for people to have or a virtual console or whatever it is. And people can continue doing what they're doing and they could make money on it. Like, ally yourself with these people. Don't freaking like take them down. It's just like it's not a good long-term strategy. I just don't understand the thought behind it. It just doesn't make sense. Now, in the sense that if you do nothing at all, it's better to like Heon brings up in a legal sense. Like if you don't do this, then like you're saying, if you do try to pursue something, you select some ROM website or whatever, like, take this down. There would be legal grounds for them to say, well, you haven't done anything about these people, and for 50 years they've been
a long time,
they've been offering this. So, like, anyways, the copyright law gets very complicated in that instance. So
I'd say even in terms of revenue sharing, though, the SNES Classic would not have sold that well if emulating was not a thing. So there are some people, the SNES Classic would not have sold as well if Nintendo had shut down all ROMs and emulators.
Yeah, definitely not.
It would not have sold as well because in some ways people keep saying, oh, this is nostalgia, and that definitely plays into it. There's a huge nostalgia factor. Also, anybody who's under 20 who has, enjoyed playing the SNES Classic, that's not so much nostalgia. Because you didn't grow up playing those games necessarily. You may have discovered them later. So the whole nostalgia thing maybe doesn't factor into it. Sometimes it's just like, hey, I emulated these games, they're fun, and now I'm playing them. Like it's not even a blast from the past kind of thing. So Nintendo is profiting off of emulators and ROMs.
Sure.
They don't see it that way, but they are. They're profiting massively off of the free availability of ROMs and emulators.
I absolutely agree with that. All right. Okay, so we want to move now into some of our viewers' suggested topics here. First one comes from Messiah21. It says, do you think game development companies who could afford it would ever see any benefit in hiring professional writers or novelists to help craft RPG stories? What would that even look like from an execution perspective? How would the two mediums merge to create a playable game, yet one with a better narrative and flow than current RPGs? I think to say...
been done before.
Yes, and the game is called Lost Odyssey, and Messiah 21. You must play it.
You should play it. That is actually a very good game.
Lost
There are a lot of
Odyssey
aspects of the game where you can kind of tell because you're just reading text.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I'm saying? Where it's images, it's not actually playable. You're just kind of reading and it's just going.
So Hironobu
totally
Sakaguchi wrote the main story of the game, but they hired a Japanese novelist named Kiyoshi Shigematsu, who is a best-selling author in Japan. He's a contemporary author. He writes a lot about the family. That's kind of his a theme he works with a lot. And if you've played Lost Odyssey, you would see how that works in very well.
Yeah.
But the concept of Lost Odyssey is super amazing, just really, really interesting. Essentially, you're playing a character who is an immortal. So he's been alive for longer than 1,000 years. And it kind of plays with the idea of like memories, like how much of your memory you would preserve over a 1,000-year lifespan. Because like, dude, I can't tell you how much I forget. Like I would talk to buddies and people, and they'd be like, "Oh, remember this thing that happened?" I was just like, "What?" Like, I don't remember that at all. And it wasn't even that long ago, 10, 15 years ago, you know. Right. Over the course of 10 or 15 years, it's been amazing to me, because I even pulled out some journals recently, and I was reading. I was like, I completely forgot about that, completely forgot about that person. There's so much that you forget in a relatively short amount of time. Now, you compound that over a lifespan of 1,000 years, how many things you would forget, right? So the game, when you go rest at inns, you have the opportunity to like relive memories of this main character, right? He sort of dreams and remembers things from his past. And those memories are written by Shigematsu. They hired him to write specifically all the dream sequence memories, which play like a visual novel or something.
Yeah, they do. It's basically a visual novel.
So anyways, they're really long. They're really detailed. They're full of emotion. They're beautifully written and very well translated too in English, well localized. So Lost Odyssey is one example I would point you to, Messiak, if you have not played it yet, where that worked really, really, really well. And yes, I think that more often than maybe they do, because at this point, writing for video games makes you a professional writer, right? But hiring someone who is an established, well-known author and novelist to write a story for a video game, I think is something you could do, that they could be doing more often. However, how much cheaper is it to bring a guy who's written games versus bringing a famous or even mid-level, in terms of notoriety, author to come in and write something for you? You know, it's just a matter of with as huge and expensive as games are to produce, they try to cut as many quarters as they can, and story, unfortunately, is usually the last priority. Gameplay and making sure the freaking physics engine works, and like making sure all the debugging process goes through, and making sure all the assets are created. That's always going to have priority in game development over story. But I would love to see it happen more often, and I do think Lost Odyssey is a great example.
Sure. I know that a few companies have hired people to write like fiction that parallels their games, like Mass Effect. And well, I guess The Witcher is based on some books that were already written, which is kind of interesting. Maybe not quite what you're talking about, though. But then also, even like Infinity Blade. Remember, we went up to Chair's offices not too long ago? Well, a couple of years ago, I guess. And they were saying that they got Brandon Sanderson to write like some supplementary content to their like phone game, basically. So these game companies are hiring people to help them with their content. It's just they aren't hiring people to help write their game itself. They're separating novels from games, right? And there is a pretty big difference. I think there's probably a good reason why in Lost Odyssey, the person they hired, the novelist, had a specific thing they were focusing on. And as you get to that part in the game, it reads like a book. It reads like a visual novel. At least in part because write a script for a video game is weird. It's different. It's not like a book or a script in a film or anything like that. So it just doesn't read the same way. So you could write like a scene and you can write a couple scenes and then have other people kind of stitch it all together with video game logic and with all the stuff that video game scripts are full of. But it would probably be kind of difficult for a novelist to kind of enter that domain with all the new limits and new not limits on what they can and cannot do. I don't know. I think there's a reason for why sometimes, even for the phone game Infinity Blade, they hired a famous author, but they didn't hire him to write the game. They hired him to write some book that they sold alongside the game. I think it's very interesting and telling that happens. It would be awesome if more authors and writers were involved in that kind of thing, but a lot of the games are written by like the producers, or they're written by like the executive board. Like they decide what the game's going to be, and an author would basically just be making it poetic. He wouldn't really be creating the story himself. So maybe if there was an author, a novelist who started their own game company, now we're talking, right?
Yeah.
But there's a lot of weird pitfalls there.
So two things I wanted to talk about. First of all, I had a thought about Drew Karpyshyn, who was, he worked at BioWare. He wrote the Mass Effect stories, not only the games, but also the accompanying novels. And I was looking into his career a little bit here. It looks like, I thought, because I knew he had written a lot of novels, but I didn't know if he had written novels first and then came into the game industry. But it seems to me like his first kind of job in this after graduating with a degree in English was with Wizards of the Coast. So that's like tabletop RPG kind of stuff. And so he got into some game design there, wrote a couple of novels for Wizards of the Coast, did some work, obviously, on like Baldur's Gate 2, throwing a ball and stuff like that, and then joined BioWare afterwards and did Knights of the Old Republic and Jade Empire and Mass Effect and all that stuff. So, like, that's an example, I think, where an author, like a really good storyteller, a good writer, like came up with a story. All from him is Mass Effect.
Yeah, it needs to kind of come from him, I think. Huh.
Yeah, Mass Effect is an example of that, and Mass Effect 1 and 2, very, very much, I think are well written games.
They are.
Mass Effect 3 has some problem because Drew Karpyshyn left during the development of Mass Effect 3.
Yeah.
So that being
also,
go ahead.
With Mass Effect, though, there's so much like choice. Like I would wonder, like, he came up with the story, and I'm sure he helped write a lot of it. But the majority of Mass Effect, the script of Mass Effect, that'd be thousands of pages long, would be the tiny little weird, awkward conversations that you have with people throughout the whole world, right? And so he would have mostly just written like the general story, I'm guessing, in a novel, and not like the whole script.
You talking about Drew Karpyshyn?
Yeah, for Mass Effect
specifically. Oh, I'm not sure exactly what that process is internally, because you're referring to like all the choice and consequence stuff thrown in there.
Yeah, because there's like 1,000 choices. Yeah, there's like so much that you could do within that game.
What I would assume is that he like was the genesis of the concept of the world, of like the basic storyline and everything, and that like internally, like the design team sort of, you know, came up with ideas to add to the game, like, hey, let's add choice and consequence. And then Drew Karpyshyn would be the one to like write all those scenarios himself. That's what I would assume. I don't know for sure like at what stage, whose idea what was, but I'm sure there's more people on the design team that added. It wasn't like entirely Karpyshyn's thing from start to finish, but
which is typically how authors do work, though. I mean, authors have editors, but for the most part, they write the script, like they write the book. But in video games, I just don't think that's possible.
It's more of a collaborative
it's
process.
Just a lot harder, because there's thousands of different things that aren't all that meaningful in video game scripts.
Sure.
Like, what does the bartender say when you walk in, or what is the, you know,
I know what you mean.
While he's cleaning his mug.
Sometimes they'll have like a writing team.
You're not hiring this famous dude to write that dialogue.
Yeah, there's a writing team, I'm sure, that handle different sections. Not only like sections or maybe areas of a game, but even like you handle the NPC dialogue in this town, and you handle I don't know, like something other small thing, so that this guy can be spending his time on like basically the plot and like the maybe the main cutscenes and things of that nature. I don't know. I'm not sure exactly what the process is for that, but I'm sure that there are definitely more than one person writing in a BioWare game.
Yeah, definitely.
I had another thought aside from Drew Karpyshyn. What was it you had talked about before I brought that up? You were saying,
well, I talked about Brandon Sanderson.
Yeah, Brandon Sanderson,
like the in-between novels and stuff.
I forget. There was somebody who there was another question that was asked for this week's podcast, and I decided to answer it because I wasn't sure how I would answer it. The question was, what novel do you think would be perfect for to be made into a game or to a JRPG or something like that? And I was really struggling, and I think that you had been touching on this. Like, it's really hard going from one medium to another. The mediums are very different.
Yeah, the limits and boundaries are just different.
Yeah, I think that's what you were kind of touching on for a minute there, and that's why I thought of it. Is like, because I was having a hard time thinking of a novel that I've read that would work as a game. And I've been playing a lot of Bloodborne this week. I decided to dive into that because because I've been a little bit tired of just playing JRPGs all the time. So on Saturday and Sunday, I played Bloodborne a lot. And I was thinking about it, like being transferred into a different medium. That's the type of game, the From Software games in general, that work as video games, I think, exclusively. Like, they really take advantage of the medium to tell their stories, right? It's all about exploring, about interaction, about like looking further into things, noticing the design, like working together, sort of like how these areas are connected and why that might be. And so like it really takes like essentially the adventure genre in video games, which is all about dungeon crawling, exploring, like finding everything that you can, and telling a story using gameplay mechanics of the adventure genre to do that. It's an example of a really great story told with traditional video game mechanics, and that's really cool. How would you make Bloodborne or Dark Souls into a film? It's just like, it's really, really hard. You have to take a ton of liberties, add characters, add tons of dialogue, write a whole bunch of stuff that didn't exist. It's almost the reverse process, I feel, trying to take something like a novel written the way that it is, with rich characters, excellent dialogue, and the intrigue being between the characters, and then trying to make a video game, which is the expectation there is to interact, to run around and do and be proactive in your interaction with the story, but like still keep all that without bogging down the pace, making people bored, making people feel like they're just watching a movie. It's really tough. But then you brought up The Witcher, right? And The Witcher novels would never, ever, ever work as video games. The novels would not work because they're mostly talking. It's mostly talking. It's mostly philosophy.
Right.
There's very little action. The action in it is very good, but it's a slow boil up to it. And it's wonderful. It's that for that medium, for a book, it's perfect. The story is written with a novel in mind, not with a video game in mind. But the Witcher video games were made differently. They like hearkened to that. They had like all of the parts that make it feel like The Witcher there, but the stories are designed in a way that lend themselves to video games, to a lot of proactive interaction, questing and going to this person and collecting this thing, and the sort of thing you see a lot in RPGs.
Yeah.
So that was the best way to handle that. Instead of taking the story of those novels and trying to make them to a video game, they just continued a story past where the novels left off, and then
which is the way to do it.
Yeah,
honestly,
I think so too. Because I asked him, hey, what novels do you think? And he mentioned some, some stuff that I think even he said this would work for the lore, world building, the fantasy side of it, something like the Silmarillion. But it's like turning the Silmarillion, the actual stories of the Silmarillion, into video games would be really hard unless you did like a strategy RPG, which I think they've tried a couple times with Middle-earth games, where you just did the big battles. Yeah. You just like recreated all the big battles or something as a strategy game. But aside from that, I mean, it's just a lot of explaining and exploring cultures, language, history, beautiful things that were created by people, how these people became prideful and destroyed themselves, and love stories and all kinds of stuff.
Which I would like to play as a video game, but it wouldn't sell like at all.
Yeah. It's just really hard to imagine how you turn those kinds of stories into games with gameplay mechanics, unless we go into the realm like we had talked about with Emily Short, where you're actually inputting messages, you're speaking to the game, and the game is reacting to you, and like speaking to people as part of like the gameplay, and it's actually interesting and fun.
Yeah, but then you can actually be involved instead of just pushing A every now and then.
Yeah, exactly. So anyways, we've been on this topic for a while, but getting back to it a little bit, Messiah, try Lost Odyssey. I think you'll like it a lot, and I think they did a really good job with bringing a novelist for that game.
And just as a general rule, even if it's just like in a consulting role, I think video game companies should bring on authors in the field of the games that they're making, at least as consultants, or as maybe not even supervisors, just
editors
to help you, just to help, just bring people on to help.
Let's get some feedback for some good writers. All right, thank you, Messiah. Appreciate it. Moving on now to Dude McGuy here. This was the title of the podcast. Mike, by finishing Chrono Cross recently, you have now completed all of the most acclaimed or well-known PS1 JRPGs from Squaresoft: Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9, Final Fantasy Tactics, Vagrant Story, Xenogears, and Chrono Cross. We could add Legend of Mana to this list, but I'm not sure it's quite as well known as the list above. I also left it out because I don't think you've beat it yet, but I still wanted to ask this question. I have not beat it, but I have played a lot of Legend of Mana, enough to where I'm confident enough to rank it, I feel. Questions. In your opinion, how would you personally rank these 7 classic JRPGs from best to worst? For the games near the top of the list, what did they do better than the others? And for the games near the bottom, what would they need to improve in order to rank higher for you? All in your opinion, of course. I'm not sure if Kaysen has played all these games, but I'd be interested to hear his opinions and ranking on them as well. Okay, so we are ranking Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9, Chrono Cross, Vagrant Story, Xenogears, Legend of Mana. Those are the 7. Which of those have you played?
I've played 7, 8, and 9. I have played Tactics. I have not beat Tactics. I have played and beat Vagrant Story. Xenogears and Chrono Cross, I have little experience with.
Okay.
So
you got the Final Fantasies in the bag. You got Vagrant Story in the bag.
Tactics, I know enough to rank it, but Xenogears and Chrono Cross, I would not.
And not Legend of Mana, I would assume. Either, right? Legend of Mana either?
Legend of Mana, no. I don't think so.
How would you rank PlayStation Final Fantasies?
Well, Vagrant Story number 1. No, I'm just kidding. I would not do Vagrant Story number 1, although Vagrant Story is wonderful. It's weird when you explain, like when he says from best to worst, rank these from best to worst. This is already a list of like the best. So
I know
whatever really ends up being the worst is the worst best. Like it's still one of the best. It's just not as good as the others. I wouldn't call it the worst. They're all really good games. The past year or so, since I have played Final Fantasy VIII, I haven't played it again. I've only played it one time, but I've been liking it more and more as I think back about it, and as I look back on Final Fantasy VIII. I liked it when I played it, but it has grown on me, even though I haven't really been interacting with it. I just look back on it, and it was fun. It was a great time. It was a fun game. However, it goes at the bottom of the list. It goes number 5 for me, or 4, 5. What am I ranking? I'm ranking 5 games.
5 games.
So it goes at the very bottom. And then the next one up would have to be I would put Vagrant Story there, because I love Vagrant Story. It's wonderful, and it has really cinematic, cool stuff. It was groundbreaking. It was groundbreaking for its time. However, it does get a little tedious with the puzzles and the story and the way it kind of wraps up in the end, and the limited cast. I thought at the very beginning we would be interacting with lots of people, and by the end of the game, maybe we weren't. There were just a few key characters that they were really focusing on, and that's fine. It's just not how I thought it was going to go. So I'd put Vagrant Story as, the next worst of the best games ever. And then we'd have to put Tactics in number 3. Nice. Because I don't know how it ends yet. And I have to find out how it ends first. I haven't beaten it. And then we'll go 7 and 9. This is always the hardest one, but I've got to rank 7 at the top, and so 9 would be number 2. Second. So there's my list, and sort of an explanation for why. Final Fantasy 7 needs to improve in certain respects, but there's no way any of the other games on the list, any other JRPG from the PS1, actually beats it, despite its flaws, like in my mind. And Final Fantasy 9 was probably a better game than 7, but 7 was just a cooler premise and a cooler game. So 7 beats it out. And there you go. There's my reasoning.
There you go. Okay, here we go. So I will start this by saying Xenogears would probably be number 1 or 2 had Square given it what it needed to be complete.
Oh, Square.
If they had I'll put it this way, if Xenogears had the resources behind it that Final Fantasy VII had behind it, Xenogears would have been equally as great, if not way better, than Final Fantasy VII. However, that's not the case. Therefore, Xenogears is not going to be in the top. When I was playing that game, when I was playing it, I felt very frustrated. When I remembered it, when I looked back on it, when I reflected on my experience, when I read the freaking guidebook, whatever it's called, the Perfect Works, I think it is.
Oh,
not the strategy one.
Works. I know what you mean.
Yeah, their version of the Ultimania for Xenogears. When I looked behind the developers and their stories creating the game, when I looked into their inspirations, I read Childhood's End because of the fact that I'd played Xenogears. Never would have freaking heard of Childhood's End if I had not played Xenogears. Really great book. So anyways, I put way more thought, way more effort into the research, and felt like I gained more out of thinking about Xenogears than any game on this list. So it had the potential to be, bar none, like my favorite game of all time. But my goodness, that jump to disc 2, some of those dungeons, sometimes the camera was just so egregious, so frustrating for me that I can't say that I enjoyed playing Xenogears as much as I wish I had. So that being said, I'm probably going to put Final Fantasy VIII at the bottom as well as the 7th pick.
It is a good game, though. It really is. And I have very good memories of it.
And I like it better every time I play it. So, the first time I played it...
will. When I play it again, I feel like I'm going to enjoy it more.
Yeah. The first time I played it, I did not like it. The second time I played it, I was like, this game's decent. The third time I played it, I was like, this is a good game. So... I like it better and better the more I play it, and the more I've talked about it with people. And so I do think it's a good game. I think that, and this is completely a personal thing, right? I have a hard time limiting myself when I know a good strategy that I know that works. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I know that if I go in junction, if I go refine tents into Kiragas, and I junction that to my HP after the first mission in the game, I'm untouchable for like disc 1 and 2. I can't die. I have too much HP. I junction those Kiraga spells, and I just can't die. So if Final Fantasy VIII had taken away level scaling from the enemies and made sure that all the enemies in the game were, it's just in each area, you know, they're leveled at a certain place instead of scaling with you, so that you couldn't exploit the game by running away and junctioning magic to strengthen yourself while keeping the enemies weak. I would like the gameplay a lot better. I think that they could have done something better with weapon upgrading. I didn't like the way that was handled terribly. But I think aside from those things, well, obviously not allowing people to refine Kiragas right at the beginning of the game either. So keeping, I don't know, turn tents into cure spells instead of Kiraga spells. I don't know. Just make it so you can't get 5,000 HP after a couple of hours of playing the game, right? If they could do that, then it would be higher. That, and then also not removing, I don't want to tell someone they have to freaking change their art. The spoilers for Final Fantasy VIII. Okay, I have to say this first. Maybe, do you know the big twist in the game, Kason? I don't know if actually you even know it.
I've played it.
Okay, so I just want to make sure I'm not spoiling you either.
No, don't worry. I've beaten the entire game.
Okay, sweet. So, spoilers again. Click away.
Spoilers. Are you talking about the? Okay, just give people a sec to leave. The orphanage twist.
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Learning that all of the characters had grown up in the same freaking orphanage and just forgotten everything. That was
the end of 8. I have a huge problem with.
That was the worst part about it is not that it's like that it feels like a Deus Ex Machina, because there was a way bigger Deus Ex Machina when freaking Renoa and Squall are floating through space, and they're like, "Oh crap!
Oh my gosh! That was freaking ridiculous."
And then that freaking spaceship just pulls up. They just get on it, and
hey, get in. In outer space, there's no chance he would have found her, but whatever, you know.
That is a huge Deus Ex Machina, and that didn't bother me nearly as much. And it's not because it's not just the fact that it's so convenient or just like strangely, I don't know, like it just doesn't feel. Anyways, you know what I mean. It's not just that; it's that plot point has absolutely no relevance. Like, it doesn't add anything to the story. Like, the fact that they grew up in the orphanage does not change the plot in any, like...
I know. I was like, what was the point of them having known each other the whole time? Like,
it doesn't change a thing.
How come... Anyway, yeah.
There's no reason to risk inserting something so weird into a story when it doesn't actually alter a character's relationship. It doesn't change anything about the story at all. If you remove all those kids out of the orphanage and you say that Squall and his sister Eleni,
yeah, I didn't know how to say it either.
If he and his sister grew up in some orphanage or whatever, right? And you just retell that story of them in the orphanage with Sid's wife, the
let her be the that's not
or whatever.
But everyone.
Yeah, why did all of the kids have to also be there? Why was Zell and Selfie and freaking gunslinger guy, I forget his name, and Kistis? Why were they all there? You know what I mean? It's just it's freaking weird. It's totally pointless. So that particular plot point plus those gameplay elements I talked about are the reason why I would place Final Fantasy VIII at the bottom. Otherwise, I actually think it's a pretty exceptional game. The music is phenomenal.
It's a very good game. I'd say Disc 1 and 2 are just so good. But the way that game wraps up is just freaking weird in so many different ways.
Yeah. And one thing I want to say, because I know some FF8 fans will bring this up, so I'm going to just let you know that I'm aware of it. I know that junctioning the GFs makes you lose your memory. I get it. Like, junctioning the GFs makes you forget things. So they forgot their past. It still doesn't change the fact that there was no reason for them all to have grown up in the same orphanage. They could have forgotten their past. Squall forgets his time in the orphanage, that could all still be part of the story. It has nothing to do with the amnesia part of it and the fact that GFs create amnesia. I think that's actually one of the better explanations for amnesia in the Final Fantasy series.
Yeah.
But it's not that. It's the fact that they all grew up together for no utilitarian purpose within that story. It's just weird. So, anyways, as Heon says, whatever.
Whatever.
Okay. So that's at the bottom. Next up, I'm probably going to put Chrono Cross. And that's tough for me. Chrono Cross and the next one I would pick, which is probably Legend of Mana, could one day or the other switch. In fact, I just now switched. I'm changing my mind. I'm putting Legend of Mana.
That day is today.
That day right now. Legend of Mana is next. Now, I haven't beat Legend of Mana, but I've played about 30-ish hours, 25-ish hours, I don't know which. Legend of Mana kind of blew my mind. And I am the type of person who should not like Legend of Mana as much as I do because I'm a huge Seiken Densetsu 3 fanboy. Like, I loved Secret of Mana. I loved Seiken Densetsu 3. I liked that style for the series. Yeah. And Legend of Mana is so wildly, completely different. But it is so cool at the same time. I love the concept of basically restoring the world, like being like the Mana Tree's like emissary to go back and sort of like take these artifacts and through those artifacts like restore villages, restore areas, restore people, sort of like go back and relive these stories that happened in these areas as you're sort of like recreating the world again. The concept was just fascinating. I really, really enjoyed it. And the sprite work, the artwork is just unbelievable. It's so good. Every single frame is a painting in that game. Amazing art. Really good music. Yoko Shimomura wrote the soundtrack for Legend of Mana. So I think the combat is really interesting. How you can... There's like all these different weapons and moves that you can unlock with those weapons. I liked the way in which you went about unlocking them and trying out new moves and new combos. It's a little bit on the easy side combat wise, but otherwise really, really good. It doesn't have like a really strong like overarching plot. I know that there is an overarching plot. It's just not as entertaining to me or as interesting to me as like the little plots, like the little stories that are there. So that's the only reason I think I'd put Chrono Cross on top of it. And I might even switch them back. Anyways, these are interchangeable. Chrono Cross and Legend of Mana are interchangeable, but Chrono Cross would be next. I just did a review for that. I put it out this week. So if you haven't seen it, go watch it. You'll see from that review the things I liked and didn't like about it. I think that the game's overarching plot, its plot ideas are really, really interesting and play in a way that I like off of Chrono Trigger. I think that they're not executed super well with huge exposition dumps at the end of the game and a lack of like a clear theme to sort of like guide the pacing. I don't think the game's paced terribly well. It's a little bit slow, which makes it feel very starkly different from Chrono Trigger, which is just like so quick and just like bam, 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 things happen really fast. But separating the two in my mind, Chrono Trigger being my favorite game, I still really enjoyed Chrono Cross a lot. I think it's really good. So that would be there. Okay, then we got Xenogears. For the reasons I mentioned, it's not number 1. It is number 5 or whatever we're on now. No, 4, right? No,
4. Wait,
hold on.
I think there are 8. I think Legend of Mana made it 8.
I think it is 8. Okay, so 8 is
8 was Final
Fantasy 8. Perfect spot for it, right?
8 was 8.
Legend of Mana, Chrono Cross, then Xenogears. Okay, so that's number 5. Number 4 is going to be Vagrant Story. And the reason I'm putting Vagrant Story ahead of Xenogears is essentially the fact that on the story side, Vagrant Story's execution is like top notch. It's It's a masterpiece. It is great. The localization, the way the dialogue is written, the cinematics, sound design, music, the way all that stuff comes together is just masterful.
Yeah,
it's masterful.
Very well done.
You replace those characters with live action actors and real sets, it works as a movie. Yeah. As is. You don't have to touch it. It is freaking perfectly executed cinematic experience as is. Really impressive graphics for the time. Loved the comic book style of the text boxes, the dark setting and the way they sort of had that bright highlight. They used a clever trick with textures to give them a backlight look on them without using actual lights, real-time rendered lights. Just so much about it I really love. The only reason this falls below some of the others is the gameplay can feel really slow when you're in menus. Switching weapons so that you can have the right piercing type with this element for this enemy, and then going back in, switching it back out again for this enemy, and then going back in and taking the gems off of this one because you need a slicing weapon, but you need these gems in it. And then it's just it can get very tedious.
Oh, yeah.
That being said, if they remade Vagrant Story in the style of a Soulsborne game, a Dark Souls or Bloodborne.
It would be, huh? That would fit it perfectly.
It would be literally the perfect way to do it. Because the game's all about customizing your weapons and your equipment and stuff like that, right? Like crafting. And Dark Souls has weapon crafting, really good weapon crafting. And you change the weapon you're using depending on the enemy you're fighting, the boss you're fighting, what the weaknesses are. Dude, please, Square Enix, remake Vagrant Story as a Dark Souls clone.
I don't think they'll do it.
Do it, please. It'd be perfect. Okay, anyway, so that's our Vagrant Story. Moving into number 3, Final Fantasy IX. For all the same reasons you said, Case, and I think Final Fantasy IX is probably a better game overall than FF7. Yeah. But I just love the story and the concept of 7. I think its world and its plot appeal to me more than 9's, even though I think 9 is overall probably a better game. Number 2 would be Final Fantasy VII. Got me into RPGs. Story blew me away. I've talked about it a million times. Love it to death. It's amazing. Final Fantasy Tactics number 1. And for similar reasons to why I love Vagrant Story so much, except that I think the gameplay in Tactics is overall more fun and interesting to me and not quite so tedious. And so has the same, especially if you play the War of the Lions version, the same really well-written dialogue. There are a couple spots that are super annoying. You can get stuck if you don't know what you're doing. That's a problem for sure, but, still my favorite. Love the story, love the characters, love the tone. It's great. Chocolate Rob asks, will you bring up moving ahead with Vagrant Story now that CC is done before the end of the stream? Let me just do that right now before we segue into our next topic. Okay. Fellas, I've talked about the fact that I don't want to do reviews anymore on this channel.
Oh.
Right? So people were like, yeah, he's not doing it anymore, and Vagrant Story is an S-Game cover. But I take a look at the response to that Chrono Cross review I just put up. And I say to myself, you know what? Maybe I shouldn't be done. Maybe I shouldn't be completely done with making reviews. As much as it is a pain and it is a ton of work, maybe I shouldn't at least close the door on making videos in that style anymore. I think I can still make videos in the style that we've been talking about doing moving forwards, obviously.
Other things.
Yeah, doing other things that will help me to have a creative outlet that I'm more excited about and whatnot. But I'm just saying right now that the door has not been completely closed. I've kept a toe in the door on doing reviews for games, retrospective reviews moving forward, because it felt very encouraging reading the things people were saying on that video, and it made me remember a little bit, the satisfaction that comes from working on those. So there is a possibility that I will do a Vagrant Story retrospective review. In light of this also, another announcement. I am currently working on. Please don't freak out and call me stupid or whatever. I am currently working on re-releases of my entire Final Fantasy review series again. For a couple of reasons. Now, this is the caveat. The only way I will do this is if I release them all at the same time. So I'm not going to take down the ones that are up now. I'm going to rather...
so you're going to have it be like a documentary, like one big long...
I've thought about that. That's a possibility. I could release like a DVD with like an entire retrospective of the whole freaking thing, right? Now, I think there might be licensing issues with Square Enix if I were to do that. I don't know what I don't know. I don't know if there is or not. Maybe there's not. I don't know. Maybe I could do it and it'd be no problem. But I was watching some of the early ones the other day, and quite frankly, I was embarrassed by them for a couple of reasons. One, there's false information in them. There's inaccurate information in them. And that, I cannot let that stand. I'm spreading false information, and I don't want that to be the case. Now, this is mostly for like Final Fantasy 1 through 7. I think you'll see the biggest differences in those. From 8 and on, I think that I found a consistency in my voice and the style that I was doing that has sort of remained. So there will be stuff expanded, altered, written maybe a little bit differently as I've matured as a writer to keep them all consistent. But my goal is to make something that feels 100% consistent across all 15 videos. So, by the way, we got a super chat here.
Yep.
From On Resonance. On Resonance. Thank you so much for the super chat. Says you're awesome, Mike. Well, I mean... Thank you. You're more awesome, man. I appreciate your support. Okay. Consistency. So here's the three things. One is getting rid of the inaccurate information in them. Two is having a level of consistency in the writing style and in the voice I'm using. And then the other one is consistency in the production value. So the mic quality in the narration style and that sort of thing. Because I go back and I watch, say, anyone who's on right now, go watch my Final Fantasy 13 review, listen to the quality of my voice, and then go watch the Final Fantasy 5 review or 4 and listen to it there. And it's just like, ugh. It's just not good. It's not good. So I have begun work on essentially writing or adding to and kind of adjusting all the scripts for those videos. And what I'm going to do is record them all at the same time. So I'm going to spend 1 or 2 or 3 days where I just sit there and just bust out recordings so that the vocal recording, the space I'm recording in, the effects I apply to them, all of my mixing is done the same so that my voice will sound the same all the way through. I will be removing all the inaccurate information and making sure the video quality is the same across. Because I started doing the layered thing for games that are in 4:3 aspect ratio, and there's the black bars on the side. So I started doing a layer behind it where the video is upscaled and blurred. Yeah, which I just think looks much nicer.
I think
so I'm going to be doing that across all the videos, and I will release all of my Final Fantasy retrospective reviews again on the same, not on the same day, but maybe like, actually, I don't know. Maybe I would release them once a week for like 15 weeks, or maybe I could just release them once a day for 15 days and do a 2-week thing. I haven't really thought about it, but that's on the horizon. So, to answer Rob's original question from a while back, reviews may not be going away altogether. We'll find out game by game whether I'm motivated enough to go through all the effort it takes to do a full retrospective review on something. And if not, then I'll just stick to kind of the plan I had before. I'll do a story analysis. I'll talk about this or that. But if a game really impresses me and I really love it and I'm really passionate about it, I'll go ahead and do a retrospective review on it full. So we'll see how that goes. Anyways.
Good luck with that.
It won't be as much work as I'm thinking it's going to be because I still have all the project files, so I still have all the edited footage. and stuff like that. I can just throw a new thing underneath it, shift things around. But it is going to take a while, so it's something I'm chipping away at a little bit over time. Right now, I'm just trying to get all the scripts updated. But okay, who's next? Nick of the Dudes.
Yes, number 5.
Okay, Nick of the Dudes says, "Is there a wrong way to play a game?" Now, he has some context for this on Discord. I'll pull that up real quick. Here it is. I have another podcast topic. My friends and I had another debate on this over the brutal platformer Celeste, indie platformer on Steam. Super good game. If you haven't played it, it's a pretty short game, which had a deep emotional impact on me, so much that if I watch people play it, it's always a no commentary version. I'm not a fan of people trying to do funny voices on it, but my friend greatly enjoyed the game by doing so. I used to think there wasn't a wrong way to play a game, but the more I think of it, I choose which streamers sometimes on how they approach the game. I would like to know what you and Kason think about this. Do you want to tackle this one first?
Well, like whenever I watch people play a game and they could be doing something and they aren't, my mind immediately goes to that they're doing it wrong. That's just like that's what I think of. And if I'm with somebody, or if somebody were to ask for my opinion, I would say, you're doing it wrong. But I get like the underpinnings of the question here, because can you, like, let's take it out of the realm of video games for a little bit. Let's say, like in checkers, if you make a stupid move, are you playing the game wrong? Or did you just do something without thinking about it? Or are you thinking about it, and if you're taking a risk on a strategy that has like a 2% chance of working, right? Like, are you doing it wrong because you did that? And the same thing within chess. Like, let's just say some people, when they play chess, they just move one by one all of their pawns, just like a line, just like a march. And it's annoying to play against people who do that, but it's also pretty easy to get around the line of pawns as they do that. And typically people who, after they've played a few rounds of chess, will realize that's maybe not actually a very good strategy, and they'll stop doing it. But it doesn't mean that they were doing it wrong to begin with. In fact, it might even be a pretty good idea to feign as though you don't know how to play the game and move all your pawns up, so that you can come in later on and do something when they're not expecting it. So there are stupid ways to play a game, but I don't think there is a wrong way to play a game. In fact, when I used to work at elementary schools with like little kindergarten and first grade kids, it was really funny because they did not they wanted to play games. They really wanted to. But once they got that controller and started moving around, they sucked. They were so bad. And it ended up being they got a kick out of playing like Mario, or we had an old Aladdin game for like the PlayStation. And they would just try to climb the building. They wouldn't actually try to beat the level. They wouldn't go to the very end. They would just try to see how high they can get. And if you jump on certain of those vendor blankets or whatever, and they bounced you up, and they would, because they kind of couldn't actually beat the game. And so they created their own rules of the game within the game, and they would each watch each other do it. And for the most part, they would all do very poorly, even at their own version of the game they were playing. But they had fun. And I still can't say that they were even playing that game wrong, because they were doing what they liked doing, and what they possibly would be doing, were they capable of doing what Aladdin could do in the setting Aladdin happened to be in. They might just start trying to climb the building, right? And that's not a wrong way to live life, so it's probably not a wrong way to play a game. So I would actually say there isn't a wrong way to play a game. There are just less effective or less efficient or less enjoyable ways of playing a game.
Sure. I think I agree with you wholeheartedly. For the most part, like, if you're playing something, you go out, you buy a product, and you enjoy it however you want, right? Let's say you buy an open world game, you have no interest whatsoever in progressing in any manner that the game tries to guide you in. You just go do whatever you want to do, and that's not wrong, right? You if you're having fun, you're enjoying it, and you're getting the full worth and value out of the money you spent on that game, then it's not wrong. You're doing it right, in fact. Right for you, right? Because
exactly.
Right. Now, if we're talking about technically speaking, yeah, it's the wrong way to play Dark Souls to, as soon as you respawn, roll off the cliff. And respawn and roll off the cliff, and respawn and roll off the cliff, and say, why can't I progress?
If someone was doing that, though, why are they doing it? And it's possible they're doing it on purpose.
Yeah.
And they think maybe they're trying, I don't know. You don't know why someone's doing that. And so it's like, they're playing it wrong. They're just jumping off the cliff over and over.
Let's say that person is then frustrated with the game and says, why did they make it so I can't jump over this cliff and get to that area? This game sucks. Then I think you have a little more room to say, you're playing the game wrong.
Right? You might actually be able to say that at that point.
If you are attempting to do something that you shouldn't be able to do and then blaming the game for not letting you do it, it's like, yeah, you're not playing this the right way, right?
Right.
Now, there's spectrums and everything in life. It's never a here or there thing. There's always gray area, people who fall in between the two. So I did a Dark Souls playthrough on this channel, a walkthrough of Dark Souls 1. And the entire premise of that video series was how to play Dark Souls, basically Dark Souls for beginners. If you don't know what you're doing, this will help you. For people who are struggling, for people who are frustrated, who don't know what to do, how to play. The entire series was based on beginner level Dark Souls strategy. That was it. But I'd get a bunch of elitist 5,000 hours on Dark Souls players coming in there and being like, you're playing it wrong because you're encouraging people to fish for backstabs. Mm-hmm. That's not the way the developer intended the game to be played. And to that, I strongly rebuke you. That is dumb. That kind of like elitist attitude of, if you are not playing optimally or the way that I think is the most fun or the way that I think the developers intended. First of all, on that last piece about intention of the developers, right. Developers almost always plan for people with several different playstyles. They don't have a single intention, the one way that you should play this in their minds. They say some people might want to play the game a little more fast-paced. Some people might take their time more. Some people might like exploration better. Some people might like this better. Some people might want to do a ranged build. Some people might want to do, this kind of build. They build a game with many, many different possibilities of ways or play styles. And so coming into someone and being like, you're doing it wrong because you don't do it like me, that's retarded. You're wrong.
Right.
There is no wrong way to play a game in that vein.
There is probably like an optimal way to play it, right?
Yes.
And that's what speedrunners tend to exploit, is the maximum optimal, the most optimal possible way that you can perform any action within any game is what speedrunners do. And a lot of people don't speedrun games, which means they're suboptimal to some degree.
Yeah. So I guess my answer to this is it depends on what you mean. If you're saying, is there a wrong way to play, as in like it's wrong to play this game other than the optimal way, then I disagree.
Exactly. That's stupid.
There's no wrong way to play. If you're saying you just purely utilitarian, I need to get to that marker over there to advance the story, but I'm trying to roll off this cliff and I can't advance the story. Yes, you're playing the game wrong. But at the same time, if you enjoy rolling off that cliff over and over again, you're not doing it wrong. So, for the most part, I think my perspective on this is let people play the way they want.
Totally.
Just let people do it the way they want.
A game will be designed to enable people to do things the way that they want to do it. If there really is only one way to play your game, like absolutely seriously, there is only one possible way, maybe your game was not well made to begin with. I wouldn't even call it a game at that point.
Yeah.
You'd just be playing. It's like watching a movie, because you have no control. You can't do anything.
So anyways, that's the end of that one. Thank you, Nick. of the dudes for that podcast topic.
Yeah, that was
Let's move on to Mimic Warrior Artist. I answered half of this already when Chocolate Rob asked, but the second half I think is interesting. The question is, what game do you think you will cover after Vagrant Story? Grandia, Legend of Dragoon, Illusion of Gaia, Breath of Fire 3, Soul Blazer, Terra Enigma, Secret of Mana, Shining Force 1 or 2, etc. Okay, so for all of you that are patrons at the $5 level, you guys get to vote on that, right? So every time I finish a project, basically when I finished playing Chrono Cross, I put a vote up on Patreon, and I put a list of about 10 games there. Games that were included on there were like Secret of Mana, Terra Enigma was on there, Vagrant Story was on there, Grandia was on there. I don't think any of the others you mentioned were on there, but there were a number of others. Golden Sun was on there, Suikoden was on there. Anyways, so Final Fantasy 11 I think as well. Anyways, you guys got to vote, and the vote fell on Vagrant Story. So after I'm done covering Vagrant Story, there will be another vote. Which a lot of those same games I just mentioned will be up again, and people can vote on those. I think every game you mentioned here, though, Shining Force 1 and 2, Soul Blazer, the Breath of Fire series, Illusion of Gaia, Legend of Dragoon, all of those are on the list below in priority, the 10 that I had people vote on. So I have a list of priority that's like 50 games long. All of those games are on them, but they're not going to be... I don't put all 50 games up for vote. That's crazy.
Right,
10 maximum. Ridiculous. 10 maximum. So my top 10 of those 50 go in, and then of those 10, the patrons pick which one they want me to do next. So that's how they're chosen. As for the second part of the question here, when do you think the golden age of RPGs or the golden age of gaming began and ended? I had a very interesting discussion. I'll euthanize it in that way. Euphemize it. What's the word? Not euthanize. What's
summarize?
You where you take a word and you soften it. What's the word? Euphemism. Euphemize. How is that word spelled?
What that word means?
Euphemize.
Well, a euphemism can often be...
To euphemize is to refer to something bad or offensive in softer, vaguer terms. Yes, so euphemism.
I got you.
I said euphemize, not euphemize.
Yeah, I always hear euphemism as like a euphemism for sex or something, and it's like... Anyways, I won't say it, but typically... So, anyways, I guess that works. That works.
I will euphemize what that conversation actually was, which was a lot more of a flame war.
Oh, here you go, of course.
About when the golden age of RPGs ended. So I think I had said in my video about the Alliance Alive, I had said something about they got the writer from Suikoden to do the story for the Alliance Alive. Now, this guy comes from an era of games, RPGs, when they were in their prime, the golden age of RPGs, I said in the video, which would imply the PlayStation era. PlayStation 1 era was part of it. This guy comes in and is like, the golden age was the Super Nintendo, okay? Like, the PlayStation was not part of the golden age. I was like, excuse me? Come again? I'm sorry, one more time. Did you just say the PlayStation 1 was not part of the golden age of RPGs?
I think this guy should look up the best-selling RPGs of all time and see what system those belong to.
I was like, okay, I've never heard anyone say this before. But it brought to my attention the fact that some people think it's a much shorter period than others do. Some people really believe the Super Nintendo is it. That was the beginning and end of the golden age of RPGs.
It was the beginning.
Yes, it was the beginning.
It was not the end, though.
It was not the end. So for me, I would say that it began with the Super Nintendo early on. Games like Final Fantasy IV, which were pioneers for storytelling in JRPGs, dramatic storytelling, really kicked it off. And there were a lot of great JRPGs for the Super Nintendo, as we know. I think the PlayStation 1 is like, I mean, I don't even have to think about it. No one should have to justify that the PS1 is part of the golden era of JRPGs. Final Fantasy 7, 8, and 9, Chrono Cross, Vagrant Story, Xenogears, freaking Suikoden 1 and 2. like, are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Wild Arms, freaking like, it's just like endless. So many amazing Golden Age RPGs on the PlayStation 1. That is where I think that it ends, though. I think that it was around that time that voice acting started becoming expected in games. Yeah. And I think that hurt a lot of the delivery for a lot of JRPGs on the PS2 for me. Not just that the voice acting is bad. I think some games had fine voice acting talent. It was that they were directed in similar ways to anime. And anime, it started melding more with anime culture. Not that it wasn't, I mean, it was inspired by anime before for sure. I mean, obviously it was. But there's something about like typical anime, what's the word I'm looking for? Otaku culture.
Sure.
That sort of became more prevalent in the PS2 and beyond, where I started getting turned off a lot by that. And so there were a lot less RPGs I was interested in on the PS2 and beyond versus almost everything that was coming out on the PS1 and Super Nintendo was something I would have wanted to play. And they were all generally really, really good. So the PS2 had some amazing, I mean, top of the line RPGs. I'm not disputing that, but just not as consistently and to the same degree of excellence as the PS1 and the SNES. So that's where I would say it began and end for me.
Yeah, like somewhere during the SNES, probably pretty early on though, because Final Fantasy IV was a big instigator in those types of games, and also Dragon Warrior 3.
Yeah, on the Game Boy Advance. The Dragon Warrior 3 was on Game Boy Advance, wasn't it?
Oh shoot. Then maybe it was Dragon Warrior 2. Which Dragon Quest corresponds to Dragon Warrior?
Dragon Warrior 1, 2, and 3 were on the NES, but 3 was then remade and re-released in the late 90s on the Game Boy Advance or something like that, I think.
That the Game Boy is actually a really big one too, because like Pokemon is probably the highest selling RPG ever of all RPGs. And that is like 96, like right around that time. I think a lot of people kind of leave off the handheld kind of stuff, the Game Boy and Game Boy Advance kind of things. But that was right around the same time, late 90s. But yeah, like from basically Final Fantasy IV on till like midway through the PlayStation 2. So that's a pretty big, that's like 12 years there when you look at it. So maybe that's too wide. Maybe you probably want to start at like Final Fantasy 6 till Final Fantasy 10 and all the other RPGs that kind of came in between that, because that puts it down to a period of like 6 years. And that's maybe just a little more manageable as a golden age, as opposed to this big window spanning 3 console generations. But either way, or maybe it'd be like 95 when Final Fantasy 6 came out. I can't remember. But either way, SNES, PS2, right in the middle, PlayStation 1, that's where the peak is. And also Game Boy, Game Boy Advance.
So essentially we're talking about...
I don't know that there's much debate about that.
Yeah. Essentially
I guess there is. I don't know.
I think what we're saying here is the 1990s. The decade of the 1990s was the peak of JRPGs, the golden age of JRPGs.
And it peaked around like maybe 98 or 99 or something like that.
People bringing up the GBA, the Game Boy Color was where Dragon Warrior 3 was ported to. So that Dragon Warrior 3 port was on the Game Boy Color. But
yeah, we had the Game Boy Color. That was such a cool system.
So there were a ton of great RPGs on the Game Boy and the Game Boy Advance. So there were a ton of great RPGs on the PlayStation 1, the Super Nintendo. Even the Sega Genesis had, Shining Force and the Phantasy Star 4 and some really good RPGs during the 90s. So I would say it's the 90s. Final answer. So there we go.
Oh, and then the final part of the question. What is your view of the PlayStation 1 era at this point?
Didn't see that point.
It was freaking awesome. I'm sad I missed it. I didn't have a PS1 until
we had an N64 PS2 era, baby.
But,
we had the N64.
Yep, we were Nintendo people.
But thanks to topic number 2, we got to enjoy those games, and then I bought them 5 or 6 times afterwards as well. So
there you go.
I emulated it. I thought it was sick, and then I bought them on the numerous re-releases that have happened. So, anyways, okay, good question. Thank you, Mimic.
Very much so. Thank you.
Last one comes from Zyel, I think is how you say his name. A lot of parts to this.
Zyel. Zyel? I don't know.
Listening to an earlier podcast, I'm an audio podcast listener. Represent. Yes, we finally had someone step to the fore and
I knew
say
somebody listened to it on audio.
Represent. I am an audio only podcast listener. Check us out. We exist. Literally have no idea how many people are audio only.
We don't know. It could be millions. We
could be. It could be, dude. I don't know.
It could be one. Yeah.
It might only be ZL. It might also be a million people.
Might only be ZL.
Somewhere in between those two is probably where the answer lies. It says, you and Kason were talking about what a pain the Great Crystal Guravegan was in Final Fantasy XII, and how Kason quit close to the end.
Yeah.
Reflecting on what a rough patch that sort of game was for me personally, I had a couple of questions. Number one, when do you consider an RPG completed? Personally, I shoot for platinum trophies in the beginning, but end up settling when I have beat all the bosses and story content. Okay, how would you expand this to other genres or whatever? Second part is continuing on with above. How often do you find yourself burnt out on endgame and postgame content, or perhaps almost endgame like Kason, and never actually complete the game? For example, I've come this close to beating the following games, but just lost interest. Take an extended break or hit a point where I'll never gather the gumption to push through and leave them pseudo completed. He did this for Final Fantasy X HD, Final Fantasy 12, Final Fantasy 13. Mentions different spots where he had been preparing for super bosses, but then was like, what's the point of finding the final boss? Because I'm ready to fight like the boss with 50 million HP now, and I would just walk all over the actual final boss, and I'm done with this game. So, okay. Oh, and then one more part. What do you consider to be good or engaging game design for endgame and post-game content? We'll get into what happens afterwards as like a way to wrap up the podcast. Okay.
Okay, cool.
I consider the word beat and completed different things when talking about how much of a game you've actually finished. So when I say, oh, I beat that game, what I mean is I finished the story content, I beat the final boss of the game. That's what beating a game is to me. Completing a game is 100%ing it or going for a platinum trophy on that sort of like scale. You did everything there was to do. I completed it. I've had some people, when I say, oh, I beat that game, they ask me, oh, you 100%? I was like, no, geez, no, of course not. Yeah. That's not what beat means. I beat the game. I finished Ganondorf, whatever. I beat the game. Yeah. I beat Bowser. I beat Ganondorf. I beat Sephiroth. I beat the game, right? Completing the game is I finished all the side quests. I did all the optional bosses, all the optional content. I collected all of the things you can collect up to 100. Finished everything. All the content in the game I have completed. So that's the difference for me. And I would say I have completed maybe one game ever. Let me even think of what that is. It is Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time. The only game I have ever completed. The only one. Yeah. I literally don't care almost ever about completing a game, 100%ing all of its content.
Me neither. There is no draw for that. The only times I would ever complete a game is when I'm having so much fun that I actually really want to do those things.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen very often.
and the biggest thing for me is very repetitive content that does not have like a story reward to it generally is not going to hook me. So grinding a bunch, like I don't like level grinding unless it's because I can't advance the story. I'm not going to level grind for freaking 20 hours so I can go fight an optional boss. I'm sorry. I'm not going to do it. Mm-hmm. Like not going to do it. I'm not going to go do hunts generally. Like here's like a list of like 100 different monsters in the game, and you got to do a hunt for every single one of them. No, I'm sorry, I'm not going to do that.
Yeah, no, thank you.
No, not so. Anything that becomes a repetitive task, which plays very well into the mindset of MMOs, where all you do is repetitive content for years.
Yeah.
And hopefully you get that RNG drop for that weapon. Hopefully you'll defeat this boss at the end of the night. Otherwise, you have to schedule time with all your friends again and come back later. And that stuff is such a pain and is so boring to me that generally I just don't even consider starting it. I've done a lot of optional content in the Final Fantasy series for the purpose of talking about them in reviews. If I was playing them on my own time, I would never bother. Never, ever, ever bother with Chocobo breeding ever again. I would never do
Yeah.
Chocobo hot and cold. I would never do the stupid card game in FF9. I would, except for the place where you have to.
Trino.
Yeah, I wouldn't bother with it at all. I'd be like, nope, this is not for me. And that's mostly because I play games for story. Now, the games that I don't play for story, like Mario games, generally I do get a little bit more invested in collecting all the star coins or all the stars. Like, I'll get hyped for it, and it's like I get to about 80-ish% completion, and they start getting real tough, and it's like, I'll come back to this. I think I got all 120 stars in Mario Sunshine, actually. That might be another game I could technically say I've completed. I got really close in Mario 64. I don't think I got all 120 in that one. I do think Parker and I got all of the star coins in one of the new Super Mario Brothers games. I don't know if it was the Wii one or the DS one. I think it was a Wii one, but anyways, point being, I generally don't enjoy end or post game content because it's very repetitive. And I don't like repetitive things that don't have like story rewards or like quests with good stories written to them or something like that. So I usually don't bother. So I usually stop playing a game once I've seen the credits. Credits roll.
Yeah, me too.
I beat the game. I'm done.
Because that's when the story is over.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're going to keep playing the game, I don't know. It must have been a really fun game because, like, for the most part, when the story's done, and that's one of the questions that was asked here by Zell is, like, when do you consider a game like completed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you complete the story. Like, it depends on why you're playing the game. But if the story is complete, I consider the game complete.
There you go.
So
the story's complete, but is the game complete?
I mean, but the story is the game. At least it should be. Maybe that's my own idealized, like, you know, bias for what a game should be, because a lot of people play games for different reasons. But for me, when the credits roll, like, even for Marvel movies, I don't like after scene credits. Like, when the credits roll, the game's over. Like, don't have me do anything or do something I don't want to do. And that's part of the problem I have with Marvel credits is that, watch the credits and then you get this other thing. Do something you don't want to do, and then you can have something else. And it's like, games should never do that. The games, if I don't like doing something, this is why I don't beat games quite often. As soon as the game gets tedious or to be a thing that I don't want to do, that I don't have as much fun doing, like, I stop playing because for me, that's part of what a game is or should be. So,
yeah. So the next part was like, what do you consider to be good or engaging game design for end game and post game content? I think that sometimes I find myself willing to go through repetitive tasks. Like if the quest design is something I've already done before, as long as like there's something new to be discovered with the story that particular quest is telling, right? Like, I think The Witcher 3 is probably the best example I can think of when it comes to side quests, because almost every side quest in the freaking game tells you a story about people or like the world itself. You learn about like the different types of monsters. You learn about the world. You're learning something interesting lore-wise within that universe in every side quest you do. Now, the tasks you actually do in the side quests, obviously there's a ceiling to the types of monsters you fight in The Witcher 3, or like visiting this city again, or whatever it may be. Like, there are definitely, in any game you play, going to be repetitive tasks to some extent or another. But as long as you can offer something really interesting from the lore side, from the story of the game, to coincide with completing those quests, generally I'm going to stay interested. As long as it's not like, geez, like exactly the same task over and over and over and over and over again.
Right.
Like, you go back to a guy and he says, go to this place and give me 5 of this thing, and then you go do it, and then he does the same exact type of quest again. Go to this place and give me 10 of this kind of thing. And then you go back to him, and he's like, okay, now go to this place and give me 12 of this kind of thing. Like, as long as they mix that up somewhat, I mean, even if there's only 5 quest types in the whole game, make them go between them. Don't repeat the same quest type over and over and over again. That I can't stand. So even if you only have somewhere between like 3 and 5 quest types, which is pretty low, alternate between them and offer something interesting lore-wise, and I'll stay hooked for end and post-game content. Otherwise, I won't. I'll quit.
But that's what a game, like, there are a lot of people who will, like, just like, I don't even know the word. They'll push through a game and a part that they don't want to play just so that they can say they did it. Or like there are sometimes, or maybe there is a sense of accomplishment once you've done something hard and something not a lot of people have done. And that's cool. But sometimes the reason no one else has done it is because it's not something they want to do. Right. And so the game designers need to come up with a way to make sure that every part of their game is super engaging at every point. I know that's really hard to do, and it's probably asking way too much for a 60-hour game to constantly be that engaging and to never have any filler and all that kind of stuff. I never have to level grind or anything. And I expect some of that. I'm willing to deal with an amount of it in order to get. It's just when that gets too much. And I personally, I would like it if it just didn't happen at all. If I didn't have any tedious things or any parts of the game that I don't want to do, don't make me do any of it.
Yeah.
And that is way too idealized. That is way too much. But some games really, I think the games that maybe accomplish that the most would be games like Harvest Moon and Stardew Valley, where
there's a lot of diversity. Yeah.
There's a lot. And as much as like, maybe not even though, because I don't really want to get up and water all the crops. I don't really want to do that. It takes a long time out of my day, and I got stuff I need to do. Luckily, in Stardew Valley, you can buy sprinklers that kind of do it for you, right? You can work towards something like that.
So one thing Harvest Moon needed so bad was sprinklers.
What?
That's what Harvest Moon needed so bad was sprinklers.
I know. So you didn't have to go and every day wasting almost the entire day watering your crops. It's pretty ridiculous. But
so you get that time,
I guess there is that. Like, I don't want to do that, but I do it. It's a nuisance for me. But if you're going to simulate farming life, you have to do that.
Yeah. If simulation is part of your subgenre, there's going to be some level of tediousness that is, I guess, expected to be there.
But there are certain things that are tedious, but they're kind of fun for me too. Like, I don't know, maybe some people don't like, maybe I'm having a hard time thinking of an example right now, but some things are generally speaking tedious. Like stuff in Breath of the Wild, like finding all the shrines, I guess. Maybe some people didn't like doing that, but I really had fun doing stuff like that.
Yeah.
I don't know. Some things that people would find tedious that I find just part of the journey that I actually enjoy doing. So it's probably just a matter of preference.
That's true for me too. Like, I hate level grinding in turn-based RPGs. Turn-based combat RPGs where you run, and then there's like a random battle transition. You go into it and you fight for like maybe 20 to 30 seconds, and then you go out and then you run in circles and do it again. For some reason, that to me is just, it's horrible. I hate it. But I find myself seeking to level grind in games like Bloodborne. like where I'll just go through an area again and just wipe the floor with all the enemies and go back to my like bonfire, or they call them,
and do it again,
and reset them, and then just go through and do it again. And
that's funny.
I find myself doing that on purpose. Like I just do that because it's like, oh, I want to get my skill stat up to level 30, and at level 30 I'll progress to the next area. So it's like I set a goal for myself to like hit a certain stat level or get enough blood echoes or souls to buy a certain piece of equipment. It's like as soon as I have that, then I'll move on. But what I find is that I'll actually do this in areas I struggled in. So let's say I get to a new area and I die a couple times and I'm finding it really tough to get through it, right? And then I finally get through it and it's like, dang, like I lost a lot of souls, a lot of potential to level up. Like I died a bunch of times there. I'll pick that area on purpose to then grind and grind and grind until those enemies no longer provide an issue for me. I figure out their patterns. I learn the most efficient ways to take them down. And so I feel like through doing that, I'm actually increasing my skill, which is something you get in an action RPG versus a turn-based game where you just slam attack and you're just taking everybody out. When I'm grinding in Bloodborne, I'm actually getting better at playing the game because I'm learning the enemies' movesets. I'm learning different weapons that I have and what's more effective, and getting better with my timing on parrying, all that kind of thing. So I feel like that's probably the reason why I enjoy it in an action RPG when I don't in a turn-based RPG. But okay,
that makes sense.
So here's the last part, and then we'll be done for today.
Okay.
He says, any updates on Landon? While I very much enjoy the content with just you and Case, and one of the biggest early draws for me has always been when you go off on tangents about this memory or that. I feel very much like I got to share that experience with you all and get to know you that much better. When Landon is on, y'all have the chances of those tangents, or the chance of those tangents goes up by 50%. He's always welcome to come onto the podcast. Once or twice he's said he wanted to and then was not able to make it.
Yeah, that's happening.
His schedule's pretty busy. At his new job and with his family and everything like that. So as far as updates, I mean, there's not really much else to say that we haven't said already. He's real busy. He's kind of like moved into a different phase of life, and he's doing well. So anytime he wants to come on, he's welcome to come on, and that would be great. But I know he works late. Like not like late in the evening a lot, right? So
yeah, he works past when we start this podcast frequently.
Yeah.
So
I mean, I wonder how much I should say here about.
I don't know when he'll come back, or not back. He won't come back, but I don't know when he'll come visit, I guess. I should probably invite him again. He's doing very well though. His kid's adorable. I hung out with him last week for a little while. He's doing great. So it's just the podcast, it seems like such a small thing. It's just a couple of hours a week, but it really does take a lot of work and a lot of time. Time. Yeah.
Yeah.
And specifically at the time we do it, it's kind of prime time, like to be with family or to be doing other things, I guess. And so it is a bit of a commitment every week to do this podcast. And
that's one thing that I wanted to address, and this is something that Case and I have not talked about behind closed doors. So that's why I was saying I was wondering what I should say. Because I'm pulling this as ideas I've had in my brain, not as like any sort of commitment. Right? So we were posting these on Wednesdays originally because Case and Landon and I were working full-time on the channel. It was our full-time job at the time. So we were all in the same place on Tuesday afternoon. We would record that podcast, edit it, upload it, take care of all that during normal working hours. The tradition has continued to it being a Wednesday thing after all of us got jobs somewhere else and do not do this full-time anymore. So that being said, it has kind of become a weird time schedule-wise, like Casey was saying, for people with families. They come home from work. Usually you want to be with your family when you go home from work. And our podcast starts at 6 p.m. on a Tuesday. So I've been thinking about changing the day we record, especially with the rebranding and stuff, so that it will be a time that's easier and that's not so like getting in the way of people's schedules that way. If we did that, Landon might have an easier time visiting more often.
Yeah,
but
that's possible. Yeah.
So we'll see. We'll see.
We'll talk about that. We'll see.
There's we might
I have one
still
thing to say,
sure.
One thing to say. So I've seen some people saying that they miss Landon in the chat. So guys, do this real quick. Landon's Twitter is at Landon Sperry. I'm gonna put it here real quick.
Shoot him a tweet to the chat.
Let him know that you miss him. You're thinking about him. There's Landon's shoot. They won't let me post the link. Come on. Okay, twitter.com/Land.
Can you just put at
Sperry?
Can you just put
There we go. I just posted it using my Case and Sperry. Sorry, I forgot I'm not signed in. Anyways, tweet at him, let him know you miss him, and tell him that he should come be a guest or something like that. Do it right now.
Anyways, though, yeah. So we'll talk about, because we're talking about getting a Twitch channel going with the rebranding and doing all of our live streams there, and then uploading highlights of those to the channel. We have ideas we've been talking about behind the scenes, so things might be changing schedule-wise.
We'll keep you posted.
So we'll see. Okay, last part. I mentioned in a comment a while ago, but I'm still down to donate for a charity of choice to have you guys do a live stream series of Quest 64. Ziel, that is an amazing idea. I really want to do that. I do think I remember you bringing that up in the past. So here's the thing. We are very, very busy between our full-time jobs and then trying to create video content for this. And right now we're in the middle of a rebranding and everything like that.
Yeah.
So like I feel bad. We didn't even do anything for Beastmas this year. So like Beastmas was on the 17th.
Did it come and go? No.
Yeah. So like there's just kind of so much going on behind the scenes that maybe you guys aren't aware of right now. There's things that we're trying to like get worked out first. Once that's all like in order and the new regiment, like the new schedule is laid out and we're kind of like in the flow of that, continue to remind me of this, because this is something I want to do. But like, being able to reach out to a charity or set something up like that, it's not something I've ever done before. I'm sure it's not difficult. Make a call, send an email, whatever it is. But I would love to do something like that in the future. So I will keep that in mind once we really get everything settled in terms of where we'll be streaming, what size audience we could bring, how to maximize, the benefit to that charity, and so forth. So I will keep that in mind moving forward. And I want to just address it because I don't want anyone to think I had ignored the idea of doing a charity stream or something like that in the past. I'm completely open to doing it, willing to do it, will do it. Just it might not be like for a couple more months, just so you guys know, with everything that's going on. But if you guys have any ideas for charities that you think are worthy of doing something like that for, let me know. So I can look into them and we can pick something that we all, would like to try and reach out to and help. So, okay.
Yeah.
There we go. That is the end of the podcast. Thank you all for watching. Thank you for providing us with the topics each week. You guys are very thoughtful. You always, your contributions really help the show, make it a lot better.
Yeah.
If you are one of the other million audio-only listeners, please come and check out our YouTube channel as well. We need 1 million subscribers on YouTube. So if we have 1 million subscribers on the audio only podcast on iTunes, we got to start migrating some of you fellows over here to the YouTube channel, get us to 1 million subscribers. You can find us, we're called Dark Pixel Gaming on YouTube. If you are watching this on YouTube and you're like, oh, there's an audio only.
Yes,
you can listen to it at work. You can listen to it while you're grinding in your JRPGs, while you're traveling, commuting, whatever it is. Links are in the description, as always. So thank you everyone for your support, Thank you for watching. Thank you for everything. You guys are beasts. Oh, we got another super chat.
Nelson, right there at the end. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the support. Says, adore what you folks do on the channel. Keep up the amazing work. We will. Thank you, everyone. We will see you guys again next week. Peace out.